Welcome to the Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast. Youth ministries rise and fall on the volunteers, so we are here to encourage and equip you. Join the conversation as we tackle the practical questions you are asking so you can help the next generation know Jesus.
All right, friends, we have got William Dmytrow here, and he is going to bring us this wonderful conversation. You've seen it in the title description. How can I see more progress with my students? How can you, as a volunteer, see more progress with your students? And he's got some great insights. But first, William, fill people in. Where are you coming from? Who are you? What gives you the right to give us instruction on how we can see progress in our youth ministries with our students?
Jeremy, thank you so much for having me here today. Yes, my name's Will Dmytrow, and I'm excited to be here. I'm a youth pastor here at Ebenezer Baptist Church in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, all the way from the prairies. I absolutely love Saskatoon and where we live. It's exciting. It's amazing. I've been in youth ministry context for about 9 or so years now with Ebenezer specifically. And I'm married. I'm wonderfully married. I have a great wife. And we also just bought a dog and a house. So those are two exciting things going for us right now.
Did the two come together in one transaction or no?
Actually, we're almost very similar. So we got the dog in August and we bought the house like 3 days later. So it was like basically a package deal for us.
It was a package deal. Hopefully you didn't roll the purchase of the dog into your mortgage, but you know that's not the point of this podcast. Okay, so this is an interesting conversation. Now, you've been at Ebenezer, which is lots of people wouldn't know. So it is a larger church in Saskatoon, and your ministry over the last number of years has grown quite a bit. And so when you think about ministry to students, you're thinking about how do we equip our small group leaders in your ministry specifically with great tools and resources, that kind of stuff. How many small group leaders would you guys have volunteering right now?
Right now, we have 56 small group leaders. That's where we're at right now. Mm-hmm.
That's a wild number. And so at that scale, obviously with 56 people discipling students, you probably have got all sorts of scenarios and challenges. You got volunteers in those roles who are wrestling with all of the ups and downs of ministry. And so that's why I love, you actually presented some of this content at one of our events in Saskatoon, which is great. But this is a question that comes up. So volunteers that are listening, you know, they've been in it for any length of time, you realize, sometimes there's these stretches, these seasons, it just doesn't feel like progress is being made. You know, we're showing up, we're trying to do the right things, and like we have these high hopes. Our kids would come to know Jesus, they would, make big decisions, surrender to him, and oftentimes it's like, I don't know if any of this is making a difference. So is there a way that when you're coaching your small group leaders and they want to see more progress being made, can you give us kind of a thought or a framework on how to maybe an idea on what we could actually do practically?
So that's a great question. So we do at Ebenezer Youth have a quadrant and a framework that we want to work off of, that we do work off of. But the first thing I do want to say actually is that it is hard. And there is a lot of times where we feel like that there's just not progress happening. And I just want to acknowledge that and sit in that for a second there. But with that said, we also do have a discipleship quadrant and framework that we do work off of that we found very helpful. So it comes in 4 different quadrants of where our small group might be.
And I'll just say too, because I think for people, there are a number of conversations we've had, and a lot of times when we're like, it's really difficult and it doesn't feel like you're making progress, there's just a sense of like, hey, let's be encouraging to each other. Yeah. And so, we've had that conversation before where it's like, hey, you don't actually know. You see these stories, 10 years down the line, a kid comes back and they're like, hey, you made a difference when such and such a thing happened, and you're like, I don't even remember that, but for whatever reason, God used that in your life. So that's always encouraging. And so let's affirm that. But then also, what are some practical ways that we can think about getting a little bit sharper as leaders so that we might see some progress, even in like the week to week?
Oh, absolutely. And so I agree with you. Like God will work despite our weaknesses, right? But the thing is there is ways to be very thoughtful and like well-versed in what we're doing. Yeah. And so to know what we're doing, I've kind of thought of it in a framework. So it's like a quadrant. So there's 4 different ways that a small group could be at. So the idea here is we could either have high challenge. So high challenge is basically like high accountability, like we're calling you to this, right? Low, and then there's also support.
Let's talk more about that. I want to hear more about high challenge, because that's interesting. So there's one line which is high challenge, low challenge. Describe what a really high challenge group leader, what that looks like or sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. So a high challenge leader could be somebody who's always checking in with you. They're wanting to move you towards something, right? And like they, for lack of better terms, they're in your face. Like they're either there for you or like or in other words, they could just be like right there. Like they're right there for you when you need it. They're right there for you when you don't need it or don't even want it. But like these leaders are committed. They're there for you. They're walking with you day in and day out. Right. So that would be kind of like one way to think of like that idea there.
Makes me think of Coach Mosby from Last Chance U. I don't know if you watched that, but
yes.
Well, like you're in your face, like that's a high challenge kind of thing. There's also low challenge where it's like, I don't care what you do. I don't care where you go. And, as a small group leader, I mean, obviously there's probably some students where you're like, it takes so much energy to try to encourage and challenge you into something. There's some of your students who are like, I haven't really called them to anything. I haven't tried to move them. And this is what we're wrestling with. This is what we're talking about. So there's the challenge line, and then there's also what you call support. So high support, low support. Describe what high support looks like. Describe what low support looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. So support is just like walking alongside your youth and like creating a relationship with them. It's counseling them. It's like walking alongside with them. I like to think of like high support would be like going to a therapist's office and talking with a therapist, right? Where you were getting that high support, you're being kind of built into relationally, and low support would just simply be the opposite. Like, I don't really care about your well-being, right? So that would be the simplest way to think about it.
Yeah, and depending on how the people that are listening, if you've been recruited as a volunteer small group leader, sometimes if I'm recruiting you, if I'm telling you about what this kind of role is, it's like, well, it's a little bit like a coach, but it's not quite like that. It's a little bit like a therapist, but it's definitely not that. You're a little bit like a parental role, but it's definitely not. It's this confusing, different kind of role that is what the scriptures call us to as shepherds, as guides for our students. And so we play in these different categories, and sometimes, like you say, maybe turning them up a notch can be transformative for the discipleship of our students. And so, so Will, tell us a little bit about what is it like to, if you're a small group leader and you're just kind of doing some personal reflection now, describe what it looks like if I'm thinking about my experience with my students. I'm not seeing a lot of progress. Maybe the reason is because I'm doing a really low support and low challenge kind of leadership in this season. What would that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. And so what that would create is it would create what we would call a permissive culture, right? So the idea is it just would be apathetic. There is not much going on. I don't really care that I'm here right now. I don't really know why I'm here right now. Maybe mom and dad are forcing me to be here right now, or a parent and caregiver is just being like, yep, like it's just apathetic. Nothing's happening, nothing's going on. We're creating low challenge, meaning that there's not much like at play, like, hey, we're not calling you to anything and we're not really even supporting you. So this is probably like one of the worst places we could be, is like, it just feels like the wheels are not turning at all. Like the car hasn't even turned on, would be the way that I would describe it.
Well, yeah, and to be honest, there's some group leaders that this is your reality, and part of the reason maybe for it is like it just feels like there's so many other details. Maybe sometimes it's because the program isn't always set. It's very, disorganized, or you just don't know what you're coming into any week, and so it can become apathetic just by nature of some of those other realities. But you can see how maybe the lack of progress is because we're not actually authentically supporting our students, and we're not actually authentically challenging them in their pursuit of Christ, in their faith journey, in steps towards Him. So, so that's what that could look like. Okay, so then if we just turned up, which one do you want to turn up first, support or challenge?
Let's go to challenge, yeah.
Okay, so what if you just turned up the challenge then? What would that look like?
So all of a sudden now you are in what we would call an authoritarian culture, right? So the idea is we're like slapping your wrists for everything. We're making sure that you're reading the scriptures, right? Like, have you done your Bible study plan? Would be one way I would think of it. But it does not come with any level of support with it. It would create a discouragement culture. Like, maybe your youth are showing up, but they definitely are scared to, and they're scared of you. You wouldn't be, here's how I describe it. You wouldn't be the first person they would come to if something came up in their life that they needed to either confess sin in, or they just needed a helping hand, right? They needed someone there for them. And so you would just create an authoritarian culture for it.
Yeah. And I know I've seen in ministries that I've led, I mean, I've been, this has been me personally too. Sometimes when you have challenging, behavioral issues in your group, your instinct is just to ratchet up that challenge, even at, like not at a spiritual level, but just like, hey, you guys aren't paying attention. You're not doing what you're supposed to do. And so like, I'm kicking you out and you're, a jerk for this. And like all of a sudden you ratchet up that and it becomes kind of authoritarian and doesn't quite seem to get to what you're hoping for, but you're certainly becoming more clear on what you're wanting students to experience, what you're wanting them to do, which is moving up the challenge. Okay.
It's moving up something, but it's not necessarily the right thing, right?
Sure. Well, one without the other becomes, you can see that there could be an issue with it. And that you might still see some lack of progress. I know I can think about a few different small groups where it was like, the leader was very challenging, but without the support, the students weren't responding to it. And so that became part of the challenge. Okay. So let's go back. Let's think, okay, you've got no challenge, you got no support, and you just ratchet up the support. What does that look like?
Yeah, and so this is what I would call the babysitter culture. So the idea is we have a lot of support, right, but no challenge. And this is what we would create called a cozy culture. And this is actually where 90% of small groups would be. This would be my evaluation of them, at least in my own experience of walking with a lot of our small group leaders. Our natural instincts actually to be here in our current cultural framework that we're in Canada specifically today. And so what we see is we want to have a high relationship, and we want to have we love each other, we're with each other, we're hanging out all the time, but there's no challenge. There's no accountability. There's nothing that's calling us towards something together. And this is actually, maybe you've experienced this, but this is my evaluation of where actually most people are, just instinctively.
Mm-hmm. And so I could probably affirm that too. I don't know if I'd say 90%, but that our instinct is, hey, we want to be there for these kids. We want to do life with them, quote unquote. But in the absence of actually calling them to take steps in their faith journey, to actually kind of be a little bit of that salt and rub it in and be like, okay, guys, you should be uncomfortable a little bit in order to understand where God might be actually calling you based on what we read from the scriptures. We can look back and think, oh, it was nice. Kids showed up. They liked being there. They liked me. But did they actually make any progress in their journey? Yes. And if you find the answer is no, then perhaps it's because you didn't leverage your relationship for the sake of their faith in Christ, for the sake of seeing them take steps towards Christ. Okay, so in light of that, what does it look like? What have you seen when you see a group, a leader, do well at challenging students while also being supportive?
Absolutely. And this is what we would call the discipleship framework. So this is where we are creating a Jesus-centered culture where we are creating high challenge, and then we're also having high support where it's relational. There's actually movement in the small group, but at the exact same time, there's lots of support for each other and with each other, kind of led by that leader. And so, if we even look at the scriptures for a second, if we just watch how Jesus led with his 12 and even the people beyond that, he would have given them a very high call. That is for sure. He gave the disciples a high call. But at the exact same time, he gave a lot of support for them too, if we notice that. And so Jesus didn't sacrifice one for the other, but he embodied the challenge of walking in both. And I would say he did a really good job at it. Jesus was the best leader ever. And we kind of see the fruit of that, of what happened after he died, after he went and he ascended to heaven. What happened to the disciples after this? It started a revolution, right? Mm-hmm. And so in a lot of ways, that leadership has basically changed the world. And we kind of want to move towards that ourselves as small group leaders.
So finding ways to challenge our students while simultaneously being in their corner and encouraging them and being with them for it so that they would look to us as helpful guides along the way. Are there some practical ideas on, so you got a leader listening and they're like, okay, I'm a little bit passive, I maybe haven't done these kinds of things. What would be like a way to be a little bit challenging, a little bit more supportive? Even let's think about a ministry gathering this week.
Yeah, 100%. So I have 4 things that I would be thinking about right now. So I would think that small group leaders would start, if you can just start by having a list of students in your group and pray for them daily. I'm just reminded of this quote from Nicky Gumbel: when we pray more, coincidences happen more. The idea is prayer really is the bar that we want to start with. And I know we hear it all the time, but I think we also forget it all the time. And so I would say the first thing is have that list of students and pray for them. Start there if you have nowhere else you can start with. The second thing I would probably challenge one with would be small group leaders should actually play with their youth. So the idea here is we might be in the gym playing a game. Sometimes we see leaders standing on the outside looking in, right? And what we want to do is we actually want to go inside what's happening and play with them. It shows that we care for them. It shows that we want to actually walk with them. And then to that kind of point, which would be my third, would be small group leaders actually need to posture themselves to become shepherds and not chaperones. So chaperones, like I said, watch from the outside and don't engage in the life of our students. You think of like a school dance chaperone, but shepherds actually walk alongside and engage deeply in the life of our students, which would be high support and then also high challenge, right? So we want to become shepherds. And then the fourth thing I would probably say, which was key of what I've seen in just my own context, has been small group leaders who connect with their students outside of program moments says a lot. So any small group leader who's connecting outside of those program moments to walk with our youth, to think of certain questions to ask our youth, whether it be like, how are you personally doing? Or, hey, what's the Holy Spirit been challenging you with today? Or is there anything in your life that you need help working through? Or perhaps is there anything that's going on that you feel like you just need to like talk to me about that's going wrong, like iniquity, sin, whatever that might look like for you. And so I think if you can kind of start with those four things, you would posture yourself in a really good way that could help you tomorrow, hopefully, to start applying those things today.
Yeah, I love the idea of like just practical spiritual questions. So I might even take them one step further. The couple that you offered as an example, I'd say, sometimes we default to those standard, like, how are you really doing? Which is a good supporting kind of question. But when we press in and we ask more specifically, like, hey, has anything changed in your faith lately? Or, hey, have you learned anything new about God in the last week? Or, hey, is there anything that happened, if you're just going to like a how you doing kind of question? Hey, is there anything that has happened in the last week that you'd wonder, hey, what would God say about this? Or what's going on? Did God let this happen? Anything that just becomes a spiritual conversation. There's nobody, hardly anybody else. And for most of your students, nobody's asking them spiritual questions. And so you get a chance to be the ones to make the conversation in its very nature about the things of God. And that would be, I think, a pretty wise play in an often kind of place. So, Will, this is really helpful. I appreciate the idea of like, okay, maybe where we're not seeing progress with our students, let's ratchet up a little bit of challenge for them. For some of us, it means we need to think about support a little bit more, and those are some practical ideas. Any last words? This is a quick, obviously, there's lots more that can be said, but we want to give leaders that quick framework, that quick idea, and let them think through, hey, in your own ministry this week, what would it take to kind of move there? But is there anything else you wanted to say before we wrap things up?
100%. And so I would say in this specific context, just continue to show up for your students. Like that will make the world of a difference if you just continue to show up. And if you continue to try to just ratchet up those skills, and you continue to build those skills while you show up faithfully to your students, you don't even know the difference that could make for them. So that would be my encouragement to you. But I also want to say thank you so much, Jeremy, for just having me on here. I love what's happening at the YWC, and the work that is going on is invaluable to me and our whole team at Ebenezer Youth. And so I really appreciate what is happening in what you guys are doing. And so I can't encourage you guys enough for what has happened from my end of learning from you guys.
Well, it's a fun partnership that we've got with Youth Worker Community, and lots of ministries, including yours, and appreciate your leadership. All right, you guys, we'll see you next time here on the Volunteer Youth Worker Podcast.
See you later. Peace.